Wow. That is a really, really exciting update, actually.
One of my hopes with the AI revolution is that it will help work-life balance of lawyers, and we'll get away from this ridiculous concept that lawyers have to work a ludicrous number of hours a year and have to sleep in the office.
Microsoft cutting their internal legal teams because they're investing heavily into AI. We're just seeing massive transformation.
Eventually, as you democratize access to justice, you're going to also make wrongdoing less. You're going to change the balance of the equation.
You're hearing it here first. If you're intrigued what the next latest development is at the first AI-driven law firm to be regulated, Garfield Law, find out in this exclusive interview with the CEO, Philip Young. So, Philip, you have an update about Garfield. Would you like to explain?
Yeah, why not? We've made a bit more progress. We've passed another milestone, and this milestone is something that I'm quite excited about. So we have now reached a point in our journey where we're now issuing claim forms at court and actually beginning court proceedings. So you'll know from your own background as a lawyer that normally you have to go through the pre-action process first and send a letter for action and wait 30 days for a response, and then maybe have to exchange more correspondence if you get a response. And so inevitably the first few months of our regulated life has been spent with claims in that stage. But we've now seen quite a lot of claims that have already been paid, which was very satisfying, because that sort of proves the concept of Garfield, shows it's doing its job and getting creditors paid. But we've also seen a few claims now reach the point where users have decided they want to issue a claim form. And so I think this is possibly the first time in the world that AI-generated claim forms and particulars have been sent to a court to issue. So I'm pretty excited about that. Obviously, being the cautious lawyer I am, I have sort of probably overchecked each of them before they've been issued, sort of very anxiously. I think it leads into sort of one of the other topics I've been talking a bit about recently, which is again, it's connected to the future of law firms and the fact that I think future law firms are going to be highly integrated organizations. And so if you go back to when I joined the profession, every law firm looked largely the same. Okay, their size might have been different between them, but they all look very similar. So they were always a sort of office or offices. Almost invariably, the client-facing bits were a lot more salubrious than the bits everyone actually worked in. And then there were some law books. There were usually some, how should we put it, more mature people who tended to be the partners, who, when I joined the profession in the 90s, I regret to say were almost predominantly men of a certain age. And then there were young people who were the lawyers who were much more mixed and appropriately gender balanced. And then there was sort of ladies who basically ran the shop, and they were all the secretarial staff, and they made sure that everything actually functioned. And I think that was the past. In the future, it's going to be what I keep talking about as being a very integrated law firm. And if you look at Garfield, it's a sort of example of what I'm talking about. So we're integrated with the court, and we can see that now in the fact we're sending AI-generated, user and lawyer-approved documents to the court, which is very much going to be the future. We're also integrated with Companies House. And so Garfield does a whole bunch of things with Companies House, including it now checks whether corporate debtors are solvent, what their status is, pulls their accounts, gives a view on the solvency to try and help users not pursue debtors that aren't going to be able to pay the claims. That's just a waste of their time and money. We're also now integrated with our users' accounts packages. So users that use Xero or Sage or QuickBooks or Free Agent for their accounts, they can just pull the data in, import it really, really quickly, instantly from their accounts package via Garfield. And in due course, we're going to integrate with other services. So we're also integrated with a hard copy letter printing and posting service. We are going to integrate with HM Land Registry, and we're also probably going to integrate with some other services, which I won't talk about just yet because I haven't finished building them with the team yet, but they'll be built in a couple of weeks. But I think that's going to be very much the future of law firms. They're going to have all these sort of really clever programmatic integrations with all of these services and other government agencies, and then also exchange data with other law firms programmatically. But yeah, that was my update. I'm really excited that we're now issuing claim forms. And then, of course, the next step will be some claims will be paid as a result of that. Some claims will be ignored, and then we'll be issuing programmatic default judgment applications. Occasionally, we will get some admissions, in which case we'll be dealing with those with AI. And for the minority of cases, we might get defences and maybe counterclaims, and then we'll be able to take those cases to a trial, which is also not something I'm looking forward to for users, but just purely as a lawyer, intellectually interested in this. I'm very much looking forward to seeing that journey as it evolves as well.
Wow. That is a really, really exciting update actually. And it's a massive transformation, like you say, from working in a law firm in the 90s, and even, for me, like 10 years ago, it was exactly how you literally just described it. So
But
from even
including the unpleasant offices for the staff, but not for the clients.
Yes, you know what? That was my biggest shock, because you go for an interview and you're like, wow, this is an amazing place. And then when you start working there, you're like, yeah, I realize now that was the entrance for the clients and I work in the back room.
When I went for an interview years ago for a training contract at what was then Denton Hall and then became Denton Wild Sapt, and I don't know what they call themselves nowadays, I've forgotten. I remember being shown a floor where young lawyers could go and sleep, and I thought, well, I'm not working here.
Yeah. A lot of the big law firms do have them. They have sleep pods. But yeah, it's not great. Or that you can be like that your desk. Okay, so you have the option to sleep under there if you need to.
Yeah, I know some lawyers who've done that, including a friend of mine who's general counsel, who she trained at a New York firm. They call them white shoe firms or something. I think
Yeah.
it was Aikens or something like that, Aiken Gump. And she used to sleep under her desk. And I keep, one of my hopes with the AI revolution is that it will help work-life balance of lawyers, and we'll get away from this ridiculous concept that lawyers have to work a ludicrous number of hours a year and have to sleep in the office, because that's just no good for them. It's no good for the clients. It's no good for the law firm, ultimately. We've got to find other ways to be profitable as a profession.
Absolutely agree. And I think it's great that you're creating these systems and processes to kind of automate that process. I'd like to know a little bit more detail about the actual claim form process and how it's working at Garfield.
So you obviously get to this stage if you've not received a satisfactory reply to a letter for action. And then if you reach that point, then Garfield will say, okay, if you want to proceed, the next stage is a claim form, and we'll ask for any further information it needs. And normally it will need some further information for the claim form, because there's various sections of the claim form that require new information that wouldn't have been required to generate a letter for action. So, for example, the claim form will ask which court you would ideally like the case to be transferred to if it's defended. Garfield also knows where all the county courts are in England, which is another integration, and
Wow.
will offer to users the nearest county court geographically to their address. But what we hope in due course is when we've got enough claims going through the system, we'll be able to measure the relative speed of all of the county courts. And so then Garfield can offer sort of additional service that at the moment we can't do, and that is to say, hey, you might, let's say you live in Tunbridge Wells like me, your nearest court is Maidstone, but it might be Maidstone is running slower than Hastings, in which case Garfield could say, hey, Maidstone's your nearest court, but maybe you want to consider Hastings, because that at the moment is getting through cases much more swiftly, in which case we might be able to help to an extent the bottlenecks in the court system, where particular county courts are overwhelmed and others are well, I was going to say underwhelmed, but that's the wrong word, isn't it? Less overwhelmed. So yeah, Garfield asks about county court. It asks us if there's any vulnerable people. It updates the interest calculations for the user automatically to take into account the passage of time, which is something I was very keen on, because I used to hate doing all the interest calculations. Yeah, then it just generates the documents when those questions have been answered and displays them. And if the user is happy with them, the user approves them, and then Garfield programmatically submits them to the bulk issuing centre in Northampton. I'm actually in the middle of a dialogue with HMCTS about building a proper API for their newer replacement system, the OCMC, and I think they're going to do that. It's only really a question of when. But the OCMC is arguably superior to the bulk system, because although it's not designed for bulk issuance at the moment, it can deal programmatically with the entirety of a small debt claim, whereas a bulk issuing centre only deals with the issuance of a claim, default judgment, and admissions. It can't yet deal with defences. which means that when you get to the defense, you go into good old fashioned email.
Wow, that's amazing. This is massive. Like I think this is a massive update. It's going to completely change everything, I think. How do you feel about it?
I'm really excited. I might not sound that, but that's because I've not had my morning coffee yet. But yeah, I'm really excited about this because I think this is it's a sort of proof of concept. We've proven that the pre-action stages work. We're now proving that issuing claims and the next stages work. And so as we go on through time, I think we'll be able to prove each of the stages in turn can be done in the way that we originally imagined them to be done. So yeah, it's very exciting, and it's also really good seeing our users' journeys. We've seen lots of very different types of users already, and we've seen the way that they interact with Garfield and the outcomes that they have on their cases, and that's really satisfying as somebody who's sort of spent 2 years building this, because it sort of shows I haven't spent 2 years pointlessly building something no one uses, and I, you always worry in the back of your mind whether it's going to work properly, and it's really nice to see that it does.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when you're creating something that's going to be used for the first time and hasn't been used before in terms of like legal processes. So I think that should be really, really rewarding for you and amazing for users as well. Like it makes it so much easier for them to actually, as you know, what the reason why you created this whole thing, but have access to justice, which is really, really incredible. Have you had any actual feedback from the court system at all?
Not sort of formally, informally. Whenever you show Garfield to the judiciary, they are excited about it. I mean, they can see the big benefits what I've spoken about before, which is that it will help take a lot of litigants take a lot of litigants in person out of the system, and give them support that will enable them to present their cases much more efficiently and effectively, and will also save an awful lot of judicial time. So I think they're quite excited about this, and they're quite excited about the ramifications for basically the whole universe of litigants in person. Not just people who've got small debt claims, but people who've got other sorts of claims. I think it's going to. One of the judges at a senior level was saying to me that he thinks it might ultimately influence corporate behavior, because he said that he's always felt that one of the reasons that some big companies behave in some of the unfortunate ways that they sometimes can do is that they don't believe that they will be subjected to the consequences of their behavior, in that a lot of people just simply won't bring claims. And he said if you get to a world in which people can vindicate their rights really easily, then that will in turn change executive decision making, because if you think you can do something and your company will earn a lot of money, but only, I don't know, 5% of people affected might bring claims, that's one decision. But if you think 95% of people are going to bring claims, that's a very different decision. And he was sort of giving the example of the post office scandal, which what was really nice. I think we're a long way from that, of course, that sort of world we're talking about. But I could see his point, and that is that eventually, as you democratize access to justice, you're going to also make wrongdoing a less. You're going to change the balance of the equation against people thinking, actually, I might get away with this, to I'm not going to get away with it. There's not much point me doing this or my company doing this, and therefore I should behave myself a bit more. Which I thought was, we'll have to see if that's the world we live in 10 years. But obviously, I really hope we do.
Yeah, I agree, to be honest with you. I think a lot of companies do think that they can get away with things because the small guy, so to speak, is never gonna be able to, number one, afford to, what's the word?
Litigate, basically.
Yeah. They're not going to afford to litigate, but also they're not going to have the inclination or knowledge or know how to be able to do it themselves. And it's like, yeah, they just guarantee on the fact that they're never gonna do it. But obviously with Garfield, and I guess in future they're going to be more other firms or companies like Garfield, I imagine, because that's how business works, right? I just think, yeah, you're right. It's going to completely democratize everything. But I do wonder, and I know we had this conversation in the first time we spoke about it, but I do wonder about the floodgates opening in the court system, and eventually, I'm talking years and years to come. I'm not talking about now because it's just started, but I do wonder about that, honestly.
I think it's something that the court service is also conscious of as well. And they've got an entire AI unit which is developing all sorts of really clever and cool uses of AI, not just in the civil litigation system, but throughout the entire justice sector. So, using it in prisons to, spot bad behavior from CCTV footage in the criminal system and in due course in family as well. And I think that's part of the answer. And another part of the answer is, frankly, if there's greater volume, there'll be greater fees for the court service. And as we talked about before, there'll be more money able to afford more judges. So I think these sort of problems will sort of solve themselves over time, because we'll see systems sort of adapt to deal with what they're presented with.
Very true. I feel like you've thought this all through.
Well, sort of do worry about these things in my spare time, and so I do wonder about the consequences of all this stuff.
Yeah. I'm sure it keeps you up at night, these issues.
Maybe. Yeah, that would probably be too much coffee. Is a cause of that.
Yeah, 100%. But no, honestly, it's literally crazy how much law is changing. I literally did a post, I think it could have been yesterday, about, over the last few months, Microsoft cutting their internal legal teams, like hundreds of them, because they've they're investing heavily into AI, and we're just seeing massive transformation. And then with Garfield, I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's just so much going on with change in the legal industry. We literally cannot ignore it anymore.
Yeah, it's amazing to see everything that's being built or has been built. We met each other at the Legal Tech Talk, and while I was there, I met loads of really interesting people that were building really interesting products, literally in pretty much every sector of the legal profession that I could think of. And I couldn't think of, I've been thinking since then, what have I not seen? Almost, it's almost a reverse. And I can't think of any area of legal practice that I haven't seen some sort of interesting product being built for. And actually, one of the fun things about being me at the moment is people just reach out to me and say, hey, can I just give you a demo of this product I'm building? And I almost, if I've got the time, I say yes. And, just last week, I was shown a really interesting product that helps conveyancing lawyers. And I know what a tough job they've got. They've got relatively low margins. There's quite a lot of risk. They have to do volume. And the product I was shown, built by a specialist conveyancing lawyer, looked amazing. And I just thought, wow, this is great. I won't mention lots of other products, but yeah, I've seen so much stuff that I think is going to see the light of day in the next 12 months. And it's really exciting. It's going to really help a lot of people.
Thank you for listening to this episode of More Than a Lawyer. If you're a legal tech founder still trying to grow your brand, the reality is this: someone with half your expertise is about to outposition you. And when they do, you don't just lose reach, you lose deals, investors, opportunities, and more. I'm opening exclusive free access to a blueprint I've never shared publicly. If you want to become law firm's go-to legal tech solution, you'll need to become the leading authority. I explain exactly how in my blueprint. Go to the description of this episode to get it sent straight to your inbox now.